everybody, it's Beth, your friendly neighborhood tour guide here. I'm now coming to you from the just on the outside of Central Park at the entrance of 77th Street and Central Park West. You can see it's a beautiful day. Again, it's breezy, so I apologize for the the wind noise. I'm trying to block it as much as I can, and you can see it's pretty quiet here, which is good. It's kind of why I am doing this here. Very little foot traffic. So this is an interesting spot for a number of reasons. There's a number of interesting elements here. Very first, obviously, is this very large building here called the Museum of Natural History, which happened to have been partly designed by Jacob Remold and Calvert Vaux. Although you can't see any of that building in this section. There's a brief kind of glimpse of it on Columbus Avenue, which will soon be covered up by new construction. So, but of course, this is one of our wonderful, venerable cultural institutions here that's closed right now because of the coronavirus, but hopefully will open in a couple of months. Across the street, across 77th Street, is the New York Historical Society, which is another old and excellent cultural institution here. They have all sorts of great exhibits about the city and the state. And hopefully, if I can remember, it'll come up later in this video. And finally, not finally, but also over here, now we're looking at the park side, is this fantastic old elm. This is the way they're supposed to grow. It's beautiful curving branches and kind of overarching the sidewalk. It's beautiful, and it's even obviously more beautiful when the leaves come out. So the real reason why I came to this spot is because of this bust here. The bust is of Alexander von Humboldt, and I saw a TV presentation on him recently on the Smithsonian Channel, and reminded me how impressive this particular individual was. So I thought, what a great spot to come and talk about something else somewhat associated with the park. So Alexander von Humboldt was a 19th century aristocrat who was pretty much the father of natural sciences and earth sciences. He spent years traipsing around South America and Central America, cataloging all sorts of plants and animals and insects, mapping everywhere he'd been. He made the association between volcanism and earthquakes, and just really was an impressive and insatiable. He had an insatiable need for learning and learning about the earth. And what he did was he took all of this information, and this is reams, hundreds and thousands of pages of data, and he collected them into hundreds of books and papers. And his main book that he is known for now, which of course he's not very famous now, but he was known for then and more so now, is a series of books called Cosmos, K-O-S-M-O-S, and it elaborates on his viewpoint that the Earth is one giant living organism, and everything is is connected to everything else. Interconnected is the word I was looking for. And he had a very egalitarian view of science and life. And this was in contrast to the prevailing attitude of the time in the 19th century and before, where Earth had placed the animals and trees and living things on this earth to service human beings, and that was not what Humboldt was about at all. So this was revolutionary and a basis for Darwin. Darwin was very highly influenced by by Humboldt, and thought of him very, very, very highly. So what else can I tell you? I actually wrote some notes because there's a lot about him. Oh yeah, so he also he was an influence of other people such as Walt Whitman, the poet, here in the United States, the Hudson River School of Art here in New York State again, and so the Hudson River School painters kind of embodied his thought about man's relationship to nature, and that man was not on top of nature, but in fact subservient and just part of, maybe it's not subservient, but part of nature, a part of the whole. So, and their artwork is grand and beautiful, and highly recommend looking for it. And in fact, what I can tell you is that there are a number of Hudson River School paintings at the New York Historical Society. So it's definitely worth a visit, as I mentioned before. So others who were influenced by Mr. Humboldt, Herr Humboldt, were Calvert, Vaux, and Frederick Olmsted, of course, the designers of Central Park. They also felt that nature was a big influence on the way how we act and behave and view the world. And what they wanted to do was bring nature to the all kinds of people. Again, the egalitarian viewpoint. They wanted everybody to be able to enjoy the park, not just the wealthy in their carriages, but the regular working employed people who had to work 6 days a week and only have 1 day of rest. And Frederick Olmsted even took this a little bit further, and his viewpoint was the park was a park for the people and not just for the wealthy. So it's again, we're lucky to have this. So another association between our parks creators and the Hudson River School is Calvert Vaux was a friend of one of the painters, Jarvis McEntee, and he in fact even married McEntee's sister. So there's all sorts of threads and connections and things like that associated with Alexander von Humboldt. And lastly, I'm going to go back to the bust for a minute and just explain that the bust was placed here in 1869, or placed in the park anyway, in 1869, 10 years after Humboldt passed away. And it was originally located in the one of our woodlands called the Ramble, and then it was moved out to the corner of the southeastern corner of the park at 59th and 5th Avenue, and then finally it was relocated here in 1981, which makes sense because, of course, we are across the street from the American Museum of Natural History, which benefited greatly from Humboldt's studies, as well as the Smithsonian Institution, same situation. So there you have it. That is our story about Alexander von Humboldt. Definitely look into him. I am going to read Cosmos. I think it's as big as The Power Broker is, if anybody's familiar with that book. It's enormous, but I'm going to give it a shot. So this gate, well, each entrance is considered a gate, or the large entrance, and each one has a name. This one happens to be Naturalistic Gate. And when the park was being constructed, it was decided that each of these entrances would have its own name, like Naturalist Gate, or Engineer's Gate, or Merchant's Gate, Women's Gate, Children's or Child's Gate. So each, they applied to the different types of citizens that were here in the city. So the gates were not originally carved with their names, I think due to financial purposes, budgetary purposes. But in 1999, the parks commissioner at the time, his name was Henry Stern, decided he thought this would be appropriate. So gates' names were carved into the wall. So next time you walk into the park, take a look and see what your favorite entrance is named. This is one of our rustic bridges. They are constructed by Central Park woodworkers who are employees of the Conservancy. And they are built in the style of Calvert Vaux's rustic furniture that he used to create. And it spans this funny little waterway here. You can see the bridge in the distance. That's Balcony Bridge with the drive going over it, and then this little waterway goes under the bridge, goes out to the main lake. And what this is an extension of the lake that, I'm going to turn myself around here, used to be the backside of the lake here, and it was called Ladies Pond. And it was so named because this area was specifically constructed so that women could go ice skating by themselves, and the men were not allowed to come under Balcony Bridge to skate with them. So this was the idea. The Victorian thought was women did not want to be bothered by men while they're enjoying their outdoor exercises, so this is where they could come and not be bothered. Well, if you can imagine, it wasn't particularly popular, and eventually, decades later in the 1930s, the area was drained and filled in with the soil and the grass. But the thing is, this is a low-lying area, and like I mentioned at the Harlem Mere, the water bodies were constructed a lot of times out of originally marshy areas. So it's low-lying, and this area had a tendency to get really soft and mushy and wet if it rained a lot. The drainage wasn't so great. I think the Conservancy finally figured that out, and I don't remember it really being any soft and mushy and nasty since I've been living here. So I'm going to take a little bit more of a walk, and we're going to go to the spot where you can see above. It's where I entered the park, up above the New York Historical Society. And we're going to look at this arch, or pair of arches really. So the official name, you can see the sign here. It's officially called the 77th Street Stone Arch, which is a really boring name. It's also known as Eagle Vale Arch, which I think is a much nicer and picturesque name. So this arch is not one of the original arches in the park. The park has over 30 arches and bridges in the park, most of which were designed by Calvert, Vaux and Jacob Ray Mould. This one was not. This one was created in 1890. And this is after Vaux and Olmsted were gone from park design and construction. So it's not quite as graceful and sort of charming as Vaux and Mould's arches were, but it still has, it's got an interesting look to it. I think it reminds me of like a castle, like maybe a German castle or something like that. And what's interesting about this arch, as I mentioned before, is it's actually a pair of arches in one. The people over there, which are now not there anymore, but that's the bridle path over there. That's part of the park's bridle path, and which was built for the purpose of horseback riding, but of course we don't really have horses coming through the park very much anymore. Here's a runner. So that arch, that part of the arch spanned the bridle path. This side spanned the Ladies Pond. So all this pathway here is all originally water, and I will turn around and we'll be looking at the sun. So back here too, this was all water over here until it was filled in. So it's kind of fun to think about the Victorian kind of mindset of the designers and what we've got now. It might have been egalitarian, but it was still a little chauvinistic. Here's a nice sample of our bedrock, the Manhattan mica schist. And I am walking back toward the West Drive. Over here. Be safe, be kind, and also, again, please like, subscribe to the video if you like, to my channel, and also if you have any suggestions, any ideas of anything that you'd like to see in Central Park or in the city itself, please comment below, because I am happy to research and learn about new things and share them. So thanks very much and have a good one. Bye. Here's an example of a Hudson River School landscape painting. It's called Kindred Spirits by Durand. The idealized landscape and rich colors here are typical of the style, and taking this back to Alexander von Humboldt, you can see how Durand set the people within the landscape as opposed to them dominating the scene. It's an appropriate reflection of Humboldt's philosophy of the interconnectedness of all living things. The piece is also physically large, almost 5 feet by 3 feet, another characteristic of Hudson River School artwork. Very dramatic in person. Seek out these paintings when you can. You won't be sorry. Thanks for taking this walk with me. Please comment below if there's anything you'd like me to cover in the park or in New York. If you like this video, please click the thumbs up button also below.